What time is it where you are? Drop your city and country in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more human-dominant sci-fi stories. Let's dive into the tale. They said humans were dangerous. That was the first thing they taught us at the academy. Not because of their technology. Though it was crude, it was strangely effective. Not because of their numbers. There weren't that many of them, at least not compared to the trillions spread across the galactic core. No, it was because of how they fought, because of what they did when they were cornered, because when everything collapsed and hope was lost, the humans didn't surrender, they got angry. I didn't believe it. I thought it was just core propaganda. Stories passed down to keep us cautious, tales to keep new officers on edge, until the day I fought beside them. My name is Tazern Velour. I'm of the Qatari Vanguard 3rd Fleet, a war-hardened species known for our discipline, tactics, and unbroken lines. My ancestors fought the Kraken Wars and held the line of Firaxis for 17 days straight under orbital bombardment. I believed in order, in protocol, in the chain of command. Humans believed in none of those things. They believed in surviving. It started on the ice world of Veradan 4, a lifeless planet turned into a fortress by the rebellion. The coalition had sent several species to assist in the operation: Qatari, Vunari, Grelk, and for the first time in recorded combat, humans. They were fresh off the probation list, new members of the Galactic Coalition. Their military culture was deemed unstable, their aggression volatile. So, naturally, someone in high command thought it would be brilliant to put them under my unit's command. As a field captain, I wasn't given a choice. I met Captain Amelia Ross in the hangar bay of the dropship Vulture's Wing. She was human, short by our standards, with a lean build, sharp eyes, and a half-smile that seemed permanently etched into her face, like she was waiting for the universe to try something stupid. She saluted casually, as if we were about to play a game rather than breach an enemy fortress. "Captain Velour," she said, "I hear you like plans. I like bullets. Should be fun." I disliked her instantly. The mission was simple: breach the outer compound, disable the anti-air defenses, and hold position until reinforcements landed. What followed was anything but simple. The rebels were dug in deep, with turrets, drones, and biological horrors stitched from forbidden tech. My unit moved like clockwork, flawless formation, clean execution. Then the ground exploded beneath our feet. Half my squad vanished in a burst of red vapor. The other half screamed as the terrain morphed into a trap, acidic slime oozing from disguised vents, slicing into armor and melting flesh. We were pinned. Orders collapsed. Comms fried. Discipline turned into chaos. Except the humans. They didn't freeze. They didn't panic. They surged forward. I remember the moment clearly. A wall of flame drones overhead, and the sound of someone laughing. Not hysterical, not mad, joyful. It was Captain Ross. Her armor was scorched, one eye swollen shut, but she was laughing as she gunned down the enemy. Her team, only 5 humans, followed her with a kind of madness I'd never seen. They used walls as trampolines, grenades as diversions, even a fallen mech as a ramp to launch into the inner courtyard. They didn't wait for backup. They didn't ask permission. They broke the enemy's spine while the rest of us were still recalculating protocols. After the compound fell, I pulled her aside. "What the hell was that?" I asked. "That wasn't strategy." "Nope," she said, biting into a ration bar like it was an apple. "That was instinct. You ever been in a pub fight, Velour? No? Then you wouldn't understand." She walked off whistling something called Highway to Hell. I filed the report with as much tact as I could. It was difficult to explain that the mission had succeeded because the humans didn't listen, because they'd gone off script, because they treated war like something personal. We were pulled into another operation a week later, this time on Firaxis 9, an orbital prison complex overtaken by insurgents. Again, humans were embedded with us. Again, we were given joint command. This time I tried to adapt. I gave Captain Ross her own vector. I didn't micromanage. I watched as her squad repelled from the atmosphere using little more than armored rope and rage. No support pods, no shielding, just teeth and fire. The Vunari commander said it best: "They're not soldiers. They're apex predators dressed like soldiers." Then came the operation that changed everything: the black halls of Theraxis, a derelict city, long abandoned, said to be cursed. But when the intelligence came in, rebels were stockpiling nuclear munitions inside. We had no choice but to send a joint strike team. That's when I saw true terror. Not from the enemy, from the humans. Inside those halls, something ancient stirred. Not just traps, not just insurgents, but something older. Bioweapons fused with memory tech. Things that whispered in your head and made you feel like you were back in the womb, drowning. My team crumbled. Even the strongest Qatari warriors began to claw at their helmets. Grelk officers sobbed in the corner. The AI guidance system screamed in binary and shut down. Only the humans advanced. Captain Ross didn't blink. She pulled out a device I'd never seen, something she called a music stick. She shoved it into her helmet, and I swear her vitals stabilized. Her team followed. I later learned it was a playlist, a human technique, rhythmic sound used to override fear. They had tracks named War Pigs, Thunderstruck, and Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. It worked. They moved like wrath incarnate. I saw a human private named Ortega run face first into a psionic field, grin, and say, "That all you got, you creepy jellyfish." They made it to the core. They detonated the munitions. They walked out on fire, laughing, dragging wounded rebels behind them like party favors. The rest of us watched in silence. That was the day I stopped thinking of humans as part of the coalition. They weren't part of anything. They were what you called when everything else failed. They were what you sent when you didn't need survivor. There are things they don't teach in any war academy. Not in the Qatari system. Not in the Grelk's Hive archives. Not even in the mighty libraries of Vernash. Things you can only learn in the dark when your boots are sinking into blood-soaked ground, and the only sound louder than your breathing is the inhuman shriek of something that should not exist. That was Theraxis. That was the day the Coalition learned why you never leave humans unsupervised. After the incident, most species submitted formal complaints. The Vunari delegation demanded an immediate recall of all human combat units. The Grelk wanted to classify them as biological anomalies and restrict their field deployment. But the Council did nothing, not because they didn't believe the reports, but because they did. Every line of every after-action brief confirmed the same truth. Humans didn't just survive the impossible, they reshaped it. Command reassigned Captain Ross's unit to a special task force, designation Project Chimera, classified operations only, no oversight. And yet, through a twist of fate, or the spiteful sense of humor the universe seems to favor, I was reassigned as liaison. I wasn't even surprised when I got the message. I simply packed my gear, recharged my armor, and whispered a short prayer to whatever gods might still pity fools like me. We rendezvoused on the dead moon of Kalari Prime. A refueling station turned intel hub. It now operated as a black site, its corridors full of secrets and old war ghosts. Ross greeted me at the hangar, as casual as ever, drinking what she called jet fuel coffee and wearing a grin that had no business being that confident in a place so quiet. "They send you to babysit us again?" she asked. "Seems the universe hates us both," I replied. She raised her mug in a toast to mutual suffering. We were briefed inside a hollowed-out reactor chamber. Around us, human operatives lounged with an ease I still didn't understand. One was sharpening a blade longer than his arm. Another, Private Ortega again, was bouncing a grenade between his hands like a toy. No fear, no caution, just hunger. The mission? Infiltrate an abandoned research station on the edge of null space. Anomaly detected. Communications severed. No life signs, but energy spikes off the charts. Coalition AI refused to enter. Psionic corruption was the official term. But humans, they called it a challenge. We dropped in silence. No rallying cry. No tactical banter. Just grim purpose. The station was ancient, predating known galactic architecture. Carved metal fused with bone. Symbols that pulsed with anti-light. Something lived here, or had once, and it did not like to be disturbed. As we stepped through the breach point, my translator began glitching. Words lost meaning. Time felt slippery, A voice whispered in my head, "Run." I turned. The human squad was already advancing, unfazed. Ross looked back at me. "Valor. You still breathing?" "Yes." "Then move. Whatever's talking, it's scared of us." Inside, the halls twisted like intestines. At the core, we found what remained of the last team coalition scouts. Faces frozen in agony. Blood dried into shapes that shouldn't exist in any geometry. Something had torn their thoughts apart. Then the walls moved. They weren't walls. They were cocoons, holding something. Eyes opened, and the screaming started. Hook approximately 2,000 words in. I thought I knew fear. I'd fought the mind leeches of Zarn. I'd seen starships crack in orbit and heard the dying breathe through static. But nothing prepared me for the moment those cocoons burst open and released the unshaped. They weren't creatures. They were wrongness incarnate. Not just grotesque, but incompatible with biology. They vibrated between dimensions, rippling reality as they moved. One touched a Grelp trooper, it dissolved. Not burned, not melted, just gone, like it had never been. The humans didn't flinch. Ross barked a command. Her squad switched ammo types mid-combat, plasma to ionized steel, then to something I'd never seen before. Weapons designed for myth. They fought like monsters. Ortega got lifted into the air by a tendril. He detonated his own grenade, laughing as he took the thing with him. It wasn't courage. It wasn't even insanity. It was joy. Every moment they bled, they fought harder. Like pain was a fuel, like death was an inconvenience. I watched a human corporal with a shattered leg crawl across the floor, carve a symbol into the metal, and trigger a feedback pulse that shattered a dozen cocoons. She didn't even scream. She just looked at the thing above her and spat. They say humans evolved from predator. They're wrong. Predators kill to eat. Humans kill to win. The core chamber pulsed like a heart. Inside, something vast stirred, sleeping or dying, I couldn't tell. It radiated intelligence, but not sentience. It was hunger, given form. Ross stood at the threshold. "No going back," she said. "Do you understand what that thing is?" I asked. She nodded. "Do you?" I didn't, but I followed her anyway. The humans didn't use formation. They flowed. One fell, another took position. It was jazz, not war. Controlled chaos. They moved like a single organism. When the entity inside the core lashed out, screaming through gravity and time, they screamed back. One of them yelled, "This is Earth's house now." I didn't know what that meant, but the entity recoiled, and that's when I realized the truth. It wasn't that humans didn't feel fear. It was that fear didn't slow them down. They wore it like armor. They say history is written by the victors. But there are no books that can describe what happened in the core of that dead station because no one sane would believe it. That's why it's not archived in coalition memory banks. That's why the only records are encrypted deep inside human military servers. Even then, you won't find details. Just a timestamp, a code name, and a warning: never engage Earth units beyond containment class 9. When we breached the pulsating threshold of the chamber, the air collapsed inward. It wasn't a vacuum. It was pressure folding space like origami. Colors bled wrong. Purple tasted like static. My armor's HUD began displaying human names from Earth mythology: Cerberus, Ragnarok, Leviathan. I realized it was my own brain breaking down trying to process the scale of what we were facing. Then Ross stepped forward. No helmet. Just her scars and that grin, the one she wore like a threat. "Activate override," she said. One of her team, barely more than a kid, tapped his gauntlet. "Ma'am, this is beyond our breach protocol." "Exactly. You ever want to die normal, Simmons?" "No, ma'am." "Then light it up." They triggered something. Not a weapon. Not quite. It was human ritual layered into tech. The entire squad knelt, pressed their palms to the ground, and began humming. Low, unified, primal. And the entity in the chamber, whatever dimensional parasite had wrapped itself in the station's machinery, stopped moving. It wasn't dead. It was confused. I turned, whispering, "What the hell are you doing?" Ross didn't look back, teaching it fear. They rose together, eyes glowing from the nanite overlays in their systems. Ross raised a crude steel blade. Nothing fancy, just sharpened rage. She advanced, and the rest followed. Not like soldiers but like wolves. The thing responded. It manifested copies of them, humans, down to the last detail. Clones made of void energy, screaming with half-formed voices. Most species would have collapsed in panic. But not humans. They didn't falter. They didn't stop. Private Vega, bleeding from her shoulder, looked the mimic of herself in the eyes and snarled, "If you're gonna copy me, do it right." Then she dropped her rifle, cracked her own nose with her forehead, and tackled the thing into a pit of screaming light. I don't know if she survived, but the entity started bleeding after that. Yes, bleeding. It wasn't red. It wasn't blood. It was memory, flowing out into the floor in corrupted screams and lost voices. And the humans fed on it. Hook approximately 2,000 words, and I realized something horrifying then. It wasn't just that humans didn't fear pain or death or extinction. It wasn't even that they were used to madness. It was that they welcomed it. They called it the threshold, the moment when logic breaks down and only willpower remains. I watched Ross drag her boot through the glowing ichor of the dying entity, spit in it, and shout, "This ain't your graveyard. It's ours." The walls fractured like brittle bone. Entire rooms began tearing sideways into unreality, but the humans didn't retreat. They surged forward, because at the edge of reason is where humanity thrives. Simmons went down, vaporized. No scream, just a flash of regret in Ross's eyes. She didn't stop. She couldn't. None of them could. They reached the central processor, an orb the size of a dropship, suspended in anti-space. The machine mind spoke directly into our skulls. No translation, no filter. "This place is older than your stars." Ross stepped forward. "We're older than fear. You will be erased. Try." The final confrontation wasn't a firefight. It was a duel of wills. Humanity didn't bring superior weapons. They didn't bring numbers. They brought defiance. The machine tried to rewrite us, injected us with visions of our own deaths, collapse of the coalition, extinction of the human genome. One by one, the species in our squad began to falter, but the humans, they laughed, literally laughed. Vega's voice echoed through the chaos. "If you think that's scary, you've never been on Earth during tax season." It broke the entity's control. Ross raised her blade. "This is for Simmons." And she stabbed the heart of the machine. The explosion wasn't physical. It was ontological, a detonation of what could have been. The station began to fold into itself. Gravity reversed. Time skipped. We ran. One human carried the corpse of another, maybe Simmons, maybe someone else. They didn't speak. No time, just eyes full of fury. As we breached back into our ship, the station imploded. Not with fire, but with silence, the kind that follows the end of a god. When we debriefed, I was given two choices: reclassify all information as hallucination, or disappear. I chose the third option. I transferred to Earth Command permanently, because after what I saw, I knew one thing. The universe doesn't need humanity to win wars. It needs them to survive nightmares. The station was gone. Not destroyed in the traditional sense. There was no wreckage, no debris, just a persistent absence, like the void had swallowed a part of the galaxy whole and decided it had a taste for defiance. I stood on the edge of the war deck, eyes locked on the shrinking swirl of unnatural colors where the enemy had once rooted itself. Beside me, Commander Ross hadn't moved. She stood in silence, arms crossed, as if listening to the echo of something ancient and unfinished. "What now?" I asked, though I barely recognized my voice. Ross blinked, slowly. "Now we bury them," and just like that, the humans went to work, not with joy, not with triumph, but with the quiet, sacred discipline of those who understood the cost of survival. I had fought alongside dozens of species in my service with the Coalition. Some fought with elegance, others with fury, some with pure mechanical precision, but none treated loss the way humans did. They owned it, carried it like a weapon. Their grief wasn't a weakness, it was fuel. Back on the command cruiser Valor of Union, a funeral was held. They placed helmets, not bodies, on a long steel slab. Some had names written in crude chalk, some just bore numbers. A few were blank, but what struck me most was the attendance. Dozens of non-humans had come. Catan generals, Jarek bioengineers, even a delegation of the reclusive Nith, the race that had lost 80% of their population in the First Expanse War and hadn't appeared publicly in nearly a century. One by one, they offered tribute, a shard of armor, a symbol of honor, a whispered prayer, and then Ross stepped forward. She didn't make a speech, didn't need to. She placed a single bullet on the center slab and saluted. I once asked Ross why humans didn't carry ceremonial blades or relics like other races. She looked at me and said, "Because everything we carry turns into a weapon eventually." I finally understood. It wasn't about war, it was about survival, no matter the cost, and that terrified me more than any weapon. The galaxy had misunderstood humans for centuries. We thought they were emotional, unpredictable, a species barely removed from their primal roots. We were wrong. Humans are not chaotic, they are adaptive. You take away their ships, they build new ones. You erase their maps, they draw better ones. You kill their soldiers, they train civilians. And if you crush their spirit, they turn it into fire. 3 days after the funeral, a council tribunal summoned Ross. Formally, it was an investigation into the unlicensed use of forbidden tech. Unofficially, it was an attempt to put her in a political cage. I was there when they tried. Counselor Zalin spoke first. "Commander Ross, under Coalition Article 14, you are accused of activating a Class 4 ontological weapon without prior authorization." Ross didn't blink. The station wasn't going to wait for paperwork. Zalin narrowed his eyes. "You broke protocol. I saved 3 species. You disrupted space-time along an entire sector and stopped an extinction event." The council chamber trembled with silence. Finally, an old Elvari representative spoke. "Commander, what would you have us write into history? That Earth used forbidden tech?" Ross stepped forward. "No." She paused. "Write that we were asked to help. And we did." She was cleared of all charges. No apology was given. None expected. But something had changed. Because for the first time in living memory, the council chambers didn't echo with superiority. They echoed with respect. Weeks passed, and I started to see things differently. Ships from lesser races, those who once avoided humans, now sought their patrol routes. Civilizations that once dismissed Earth's brutal legacy began requesting joint training programs. The Terran Defense Accord was signed by 7 new species, but deeper than policy shifts, there was a cultural shift. Songs were written about what had happened, not just in English, but in Kataran, Jarek Pulsong, even Netherian mind verse. One line, repeated across translations, stuck with me. "In the darkest place, a human lit the match." Ross retired. I found her 6 months later in a desert biome on Mars, alone but content. "You're early," she said, without looking up from her garden. I frowned. Early for what? For realizing what comes after the war. She led me into a small cabin. Inside, walls were lined with photographs, not of battles, but of people, squadmates, civilians, a child she once carried out of rubble, a fellow soldier who played harmonica during a blizzard lockdown. I asked why no medals were displayed. She shrugged. "Because medals rust, but stories last." I left her cabin with a strange feeling, not hope, not fear, but understanding. Humans don't fight because they love war. They fight because someone has to stand between the void and what matters, and they've accepted that burden, willingly. Years later, I wrote a memoir. I expected pushback from my own kind. Instead, I received over 2 million responses from humans. Some shared their own stories of loss. Others thanked me for writing what they couldn't. One simply said, "Now you understand. Welcome to the family." And so, if you're still watching this transmission, wherever you are in this galaxy, know this: when the skies turn black, when the monsters come through the breach, when the stars themselves betray you, call Earth. They may not answer right away, but when they do, the answer will echo with thunder, fire, because the humans don't just fight wars, they end them. If this story shook your soul, hit that subscribe button, or drop a comment, tell us where you're watching from. And remember, on the battlefield of nightmares, humans are the dream's end.